Okay, thank you. Sorry for okay. A very good morning to everyone. Today we will look at the topic of array. So this is the workshop 4. I'm Jasmina from Utah. Here we have the overview of the workshop. We have session 1 and session 2. For session 1 is from 8:30 until 9:45. We will talk about the array. And then for session 2 is from 11 until 12:20. We will look at the sample of the programs. Now we are at the session 1. We will talk about the topic of array. Before we look at the array, here we have a situation. Assume that we want to start and print 5 student weight, and then we want to find the average of the weight. Here we have 5 students. For the first students, we have 45.7 kg. For the second student, we have 56 kg. And the third student, we have 55.5 kg. And then for the student number 4, we have 68. And the last student, we have the weight of 49.3. So now we want to store this value into the variable. Before we learn array, we would like to create 5 variables to store each of the value. Here we have the data type of double. Then we create and declare 5 variables. We have W1, W2, W3, W4, and W5. Here we declare another variable of total because later on we would like to sum out all of the weight and then we want to find the average. Here we have another variable of average. So both variable of total and average, we also declare as double type. After we declare the variable, we will assign the value to it. So for W1, we will assign the value of 45.7 to it. For W2, we would like to assign the value of 56.0 to it. For W3, we have 51.5. W4, we have 68.0. And the last one, we have 49.3. So this is called initialization. After we declare the variable, we assign the value to it. After that, we have the expression of total. We would like to sum out all of the 5 weight. After that, we have the expression for the average. For average, we would get the total value divided by 5 because we have 5 students' weight. After we declare and initialize the value and we have the expression for total and average, now we would like to proceed to the stage of printing. We want to print the value. Now we can print each of the student weight. Student 1 weight, what is the weight? So W1, we already store 45.7. So it will display this value. Same for the student 2 until student 5. After that, we will display the average of all of the student weights. Then we have the value of average. So if we have, let's say we have 100 students or even more than 100, let's say we have 1,000, 2,000 of students, it is impossible for us to declare such a huge number of variables. So that's why we are here to learn array. What is array? Array is a collection of related data items of the same data type arranged in consecutive memory locations. Means that if we have a sequence of the value with the same data type, we can store in the array. So this data value will be stored in consecutive memory location, means that it will store continuously one by one. Here we have the example of the figure here. The figure highlighted in yellow will be the memory location. So let's say if we have the location of 1001, it will store the first value, 45.7, the first student's weight. And in memory location of 1002, we have the weight of the second student. We have 56.0, and 1003, we have 51.5, 1004, we have 68, and the last one, we have memory location of 1005 with the weight of 49.3. For the array, we have the index number. The index number will always start with 0. So for the first value, we have the index number of 0. For the second value, we have the index number of 1. And the third value, we have the index number of 2, and so on. So here we have the example to declare and assign the value to the array. Here we have the data type of double, and we have the array name of weight. Here we have the square bracket. Inside the square bracket, we have the size of the array. So we have 5 values to be stored inside the array, so we declare the size of 5. Then we initialize the value to it. We have the curly braces, and then inside the curly braces, we have 5 values. So this is the syntax in C++. We just follow the sequence. For the first value, we have the index number of 0. The second value, we have the index number of 1, and so on. So this is how we store the value from the array into the memory location. Now we look at array declaration. When declaring array, we have to specify the array name. And then we have the data type of the array. What kind of the data type of the value that we want to store inside the array? We can have integer, double, float, string, and so on. So it depends on what kind of value that you want to store. And then we have to declare the size of the array. The size of the array must be an integer with positive value. So it will be the constant value with the value larger than 0. So this is just the format for declaration of array. Now we look at the example of array declaration. Here we have the syntax in C++ and also Java. For the first example, we have an array with 5 integers. Here we have the syntax in C++. This is the data type of the array. We have integer data type. And then num is the array name. Inside the square bracket, we have the size of the array of 5. So this is the syntax in C++. And we also have the syntax in Java. For the second example, we have an array with 20 characters. So this will be the data type of character. Here we have char character, keyword for the data type of character. Then we have the array name of str. For the same, inside the square bracket, we have the size of the array. We can store 20 characters. And this would be the syntax for Java. For the last example, we have an array with 10 double values. Here we declare this array with 2 statements. For the first statement, this is the size of the array. For the size of the array, it will be the value of constant. Because we are not able to modify the size of the array within the whole program, so it will be the constant value. And then we have the data type of the size. We have integer, then size is the variable name. Then we assign the value of 10 to it. So this will be the size of the array. After that, we declare the array. Here we have the name of the array, and then with the data type of double. Here inside the bracket, we will put the variable of size. This size is referring to the constant value of 10. So this is how we declare an array. Now we look at array declaration and initialization. Declare an array weight with 5 floating point values. Here we want to store the value with floating point. We can have double or float, depends on the range of the value that you want to store. Here I put double. Then we have the array name of weight. And the size of the array is 5. This is called declaration. How about we want to initialize the value to it? Here we have a sequence of the value 45.7, 56.0, 51.5, 68.0, and 49.3. Here we can declare the array at the same time we assign the value to it. So this is called declaration and initialization. Here we have the data type of double with the array name of weight. Then we have the size of 5. Then we can use the assignment operator to initialize the value. Inside the bracket, we just need to put the value in a proper sequence. So we just separate each of the value with comma. Again, this is the syntax in C++. Here we have the example of the table here. We have index number of 0 with the weight of 45.7. So this is from the value here, 45.7. Then for the second one, we have the index of 1. For the index of 1, we have 56.0. And for the index number of 2, we have 51.5. For the index of 3, we have the value of 68 and so on. Okay, now we look at the array declaration and initialization example. Again, we have the syntax in C++ and Java. So this is just the sample of the programming language. For the first one, we have an array with 5 integers and initialize it to 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. This is the declaration and initialization in C++ syntax. We have the data type of integer, array name of num with the size of 5. Then we have the assignment operator. Then we initialize 5 of the value. We have 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So in Java syntax, there are 2 possible ways to initialize it. So you can look at the syntax in Java. For the second example, if array size is omitted, the size is determined from the 6 initializers. So let's say we don't want to declare the size of the array. We have to assign the value to it. Here we have the data type of float with the array name of num2. Then we have the square bracket. So inside the square bracket is empty. And then we assign the value of 12, 7, 23, 9, and 10, and also 8 to it. So for the size of the array, it will just calculate how many items that you have assigned to it. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here we have the size of the array. Num2 is 6. This is when we don't declare the size of the array. So it will just refer to the number of items that we have assigned to it. Now we look at the third example. Initialize all elements to 0. Only work for 0 and not other value. Now we want to declare the array and initialize all of the value to 0. This is the syntax in C++. We have the array data type of integer with the array name of num3. Here we have the size of 10, means that this array num3 can store 10 values. The values that is stored will be in integer data type. And now we initialize all of the value to 0. So for index 1 in num3, it will be storing the value of 0. For index 1 in num3, also storing the value of 0. So for the index number of array, always start with 0. If we have the size of 10, means that the last value will be index 9. So from index 0 until index 9, all values are in 0. So this is initialization of the array to the value of 0. Now we look at the last example. Declare array with less initializer. The first 3 elements are 11, 12, and 13. Unspecified fourth and fifth elements will be 0. This is called partially initialization. So in C++, here we have the example. Let's say we have the data type of double with the array name of num4. Then the size will be 5. After that, we only want to initialize the first 3 values. The rest will be remain 0. So now we just follow the sequence. 11, 12, and 13. We have to follow the sequence. The first one will be storing inside the index number of 0. The second one will be storing inside the index number of 1. The third one will be storing inside the index number of 2. So the rest will be 0. So this is how we declare and initialize it in C++. But for Java, that's not applicable. Now we look at array elements access. Now we would like to access the value inside the array. An individual element within array can be accessed by an array name and also the index number. Index number is the position of the element in array. If we have the size of the array of 10, means that the index number is from 0 until 9. So this is the point of the second one. Index number start from 0 until the size minus 1. So the last index number will be the size of the array minus 1. If we want to display the third element in array weight, so how should we display it? We can just access it through the array name and also index number. Here we have the example. This is in the C++ syntax. Here we have the array with the data of double, and we have the weight as the array name, and the size of the array is 5. Now we initialize 5 values to it. After that, if we just want to display the weight in item number 3, the third element in the array, means that we have the index number of 2. So you can see from the figure here, for the index 0, we have the first item, 45.7, means that it is the first element in the array. For the index number of 1, we have the second element in the array, 56.0. We just follow the sequence that we have initialized it. And the third item will be the index number 2. We have the value of 51.5. So when we try to display the weight of index 2, then it will refer to the third element in the array. We have the value of 51.5. So it will just display the value of 51.5. So same for the rest. We have index 3 and index 4. So it will just store the value accordingly. So it just follow the sequence when you initialize the value in the array. In order to access all of the value inside the array, we can use for loop. We can use for loop to access all of the elements in the array. Instead of listing one by one the index number, we can just use for loop, and we need to have update statement to increase the index number for each of the loop so that we can access all of the elements. So here we have the example of using for loop to display the value inside the array. Here we need to store and print out all of the elements. Here we have two parts. The first part is initializing. The second part is printing. For initializing, we have the data type of the array in integer, and we have the array name of num. The size of the array will be 5, and we initialize 5 value to it. We have 23, 56, 2, 8, and 17. So this is the syntax in Java. After we initialize the value of array, we would like to print all of the value inside the array. So here we can display the message array num contains. Then we can use for loop to access each of the position of the array and display the value. Here we have the initialize statement of I is equal to 0. Here we have the variable of I, which is representing the index number of the array. And in the middle, we have the condition. This is the condition to loop until the last value in the array. If we have the size of 5, means that we have to loop until I is less than 5, so that the maximum index number will be 4. 0 until 4, we have 5 values. Here we have the update statement of I++. So after each loop, it will update the index number of I. Then we have the display statement to display each of the value inside the array. For the first loop, we have I is equal to 0. Then we check for the condition. 0 is less than 5. So this condition is true. Then it will display the value of num with the index number of 0. With the index number of 0, we have 23. So here we have expected output. The first value will be 23. And then we have to display the tab. So this is the spacing after the first value. And then it will increase the value of I. Now I will become 1. When I is equal to 1, so we check for the condition. 1 is less than 5. Yes, so this condition is still true. So we display the message of num when the index number is 1. So when the index number is 1, we have the second value, 56. Here we have the output of 56. And then we have the spacing with that. Again, it will update the value of I. I is now equal to 2. Then 2 is less than 5. This condition is still true. Then we will proceed to display the num with the index number of 2. Then we have the value of 2 for the third element. So it just display accordingly. It will loop until the condition becomes false. When I is equal to 5, 5 is no longer less than 5. So when this condition is false, then it will no longer execute the statement inside the body of for loop. So this is the syntax in C++. If you want to look at the syntax in Java, it is in this column. Now we look at the example 2. Store and print out all of the elements in reverse order. Now we would like to reverse the order of the number that we store inside the array. Here we have the declaring, reading, and printing, 3 parts of the program. For declaring, we just need to declare the array. We have the integer data type with the name of num. And then we have the size of 5. After we declare the array, we can read the value from the array. So here we prompt the input from the user. Again, we use the for loop to enter each of the value. So when I is equal to 0, means that it will be the index number of 0, the first element in the array. When 0 is less than 5, this condition is true. Then it will display the value of cout, enter value. So you will enter the first value. And then it will update the value of I++. So it will update the value of I plus 1. 0 plus 1, we have 1. Now we have 1 is less than 5. So again, it will display another message, the second message of enter value. Then we have to enter the value to store inside the index number of 1. So it will just keep looping until I is no longer less than 5. So this is to read and store the value into the array. After that, we have to print out the value in reverse order. So now we try to reverse it. Here we have the for loop. We start the index number with 4 because we want to display the last value first. Only we proceed to the second last, third last, and so on, because we want to reverse the order. So when I is equal to 4, and the condition is I is larger than 0. Should be I is larger or equal to 0. So we just display the index number. So num, when num is with the index number of 4, so it will just display the last value. If the last value that we store is 11, then we will have 11 in the first display value. And then we will loop again. I minus minus means that we have to decrease the I value by 1. So 4 minus 1 will be 3. Then it will display the value with position of index number 3, which is the second last. Then we have the 9 value here. And it will just keep looping until I is equal to 0. So here we have to put larger or equal to 0 because the first index number is 0, which we want to display in the last order. Here we have the syntax in Java. Okay, now we look at how are we going to insert the array. We have to use cin and also the extraction operator. This is extraction operator. Okay, for the first example, we have the array name of your list. So your list is an array, and cin is just to prompt the user input in C++ syntax. Okay, here we can see that this is illegal. This statement is illegal. We have to store each of the value according to the index number in the array. So here we have the for loop. We can use for loop to input each of the value into the array. Here we have the initialize statement, index is equal to 0, and index is less than 5 is the condition. And we have the update statement of index plus plus. Here we have the statement of cin. Your list is the array name, and we have the index number. If for the first loop we have index 0, then we can key in the value with the one that you want to store into the index 0, the first location in the array. After that, it will just increase the index number. When index is equal to 1, you have the position to the second element in the array. Then you can just enter the value that you want to store in that location. So for array, we have to refer to the index number. Now we look at the example 3 on how to access the element inside the array. Store and print out 5 students' weight and find the average. Here we have initializing and also printing. For initialization of the array with the declaration, we have double data type with the array name of weight, and the size is 5. And we assign the value to it. After that, we have the variable of total and average. The total variable, we initialize it to 0. Okay, for printing means that we want to display the value. Again, we can use for loop to access each of the value inside the array. Here we have the initialize statement, condition, and update statement. So this is just to refer to the index number. When I is equal to 0 means that we have the first element in the array. And here we have the expression to calculate the total. Total we initialize to 0. So for the first loop, total is equal to 0. And then we plus the first weight we store inside the array because the index number is 0. So for the first value, we have 45.7. So 0 plus 45.7, we will store inside the array, the variable of total. After that, we just see. Here we have student. I plus 1 is just to display the number of students. So we have 0 plus 1 means that student 1 weight will be. So we will just display according to the index number. So when I is equal to 0, we have 45.7. So this is the first display output. After that, we have to look again. Before that, we have to update the value of I. So now I is equal to 1. Just now we have the total value already updated to 45.7. So now we plus the second value of 56.0. So now total has the value of 45.7 plus 56.0. It will store inside the total. Again, it will display the second weight for the student 2, which is from this statement. So it will just loop until I is no longer less than 5. So this is the output. After we exit this loop, then we will calculate the average. So the total of the value means that we already sum out all of the value of the 5 students, and then we divide by 5. And we try to display the average of all of the students' weight. So we just display the value of the average, 54.1. If you want to look at the syntax of the Java, it's in the column here. Now we look at the example 4. Store and print out all of the elements with odd value. Here we have the initializing of the array and also declaration of the array. We have the data type of integer with the value, with the array name of num. Then we have the size of the array of 10. So here we have the initialized value. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 10 values that initialize to the array of num. After we declare and initialize it, now we would like to print the value with odd value only. So we can add in the condition before we print out the value. Here we have cout array elements with odd value. So this is the expected output, array elements with odd value. Now we have the for loop. So for the for loop, we have index number start with 0. It will loop until I is less than 10, because if we have 10 elements, means that the index number will start from 0 until 9 only. So when I is equal to 0, 0 is less than 10. So this condition is true. So we will execute the statement inside the for loop. If num with the index number of 0 modulus 2 is equivalent to 1, means that if the number divided by 2, we have the remainder of 1, means that it will be the odd value. If we have even value, if the value divided by 2, we will get 0. So if we get 1, means that the value is odd value. So we can see out the odd value. So for the first value, we have 11. 11 modulus 2, we have the remainder of 11 divided by 2 is equal to 1. So this condition is true. Then we will print out the first value of odd value, 11. So we separate the value with the spacing of that. After that, it will just increase the value of I. I is now equal to 1. 1 is less than 10. So when we have the position of 1, index number of 1, then we have the value of 6. Now we check for the condition. If 6 modulus 2 is equivalent to 1, when 6 divided by 2, the remainder is 0. 0 is not equivalent to 1. So this condition will be false. If this condition is false, then we are not going to execute this statement to display the value of 6. So it will just look again and assess the third value and so on. So by the end of this program, we just display the value with odd value, means that the value, when it divides by 2, it will give you the remainder of 1. So here we have also included syntax in Java. Now we look at some of the theory for processing array contents. When using the decrement, this is an increment operator or decrement operator. We also call it unary operator. Don't confuse with the element value with the index value. So you have to be sure that if we want to increase the index number or we want to increase the value that we store inside the array by 1. Okay, here we have the situation. Assume that index number I is equal to 6. And the value that we store inside the location with the index number of 6 with the array name of test is 22. Here we have the example. This is the array name test with the index number of I. If we have index number of I, means that we have the value of 6. We need to access the position of the value in array with the index number of 6. When we have this kind of statement, means that we have to add one value to the value that we store inside this location. Because this increment operator is outside the square bracket, means that we get the value of 22 first, only plus 1. So in the same statement, of course, we don't update the value. After we exit this statement, for the next statement, we would like to increase the value of 22 to 23, but it's still storing inside the array with the index number of 6. So for the increment operator and decrement operator, we have two modes. We have profit mode and refit mode. So you have to beware on it. You have to see whether you want to update the value first or you want to remain the value. After that, only you update it. So for the second example, we have the increment operator inside the square bracket. Means that we would like to increase the index number. So here we have the array name of test. Okay, for the first, in the same statement, we are not going to update this index number first because this is a postfix mode. For postfix mode, we will remain the old value first. After we exit this statement, only we update the value of I. So here, the increment of I, there's no effect on the test element value. So the value is still 22, but after we exit this statement, we would like to update this I value to 7. Initially, we have the I value of 6. So after we exit this statement, we will change the I value to 7. 6 plus 1, we get 7. So this is unary operators. Now we look at array assignment. To copy one array to another, we are not able to copy the whole array from one to another by using the assignment operator. So here we have the example. This is one of the array, new test, and we have another array of tests. Now we want to copy the whole value that we store inside the array test to new test. So here, this is the illegal statement. We are not able to do, we are not able to copy from one array to another array by using just assignment operator by assigning the name of the array. So this is illegal. If we want to assign the value in the array to another array, we have to access each of the value. Again, we can use for loop. So we just assign one by one according to the index number. Here we have index number start with 0. We look until I is less than array of size. Then we just assign new test. When it's index 0, then we just assign the value that we have stored inside the test with the index 0 to it. So we just keep looping until we assign all of the value from one array to another array. Now we look at two-dimensional array. Previously, we are discussing about one-dimensional array. So now we are looking at two-dimensional array. Two-dimensional array means that we have an array with two dimensions. Here we have the syntax for two-dimensional array, 2D array. For the same, we have the data type of the array. Then we have the name of the array. Here we have to declare two size. The first square bracket, we would like to put the size of the row. And then the second square bracket, we would like to put the size of the column. So we have the size of row and the size of column. And for the size of the row and column, it will be the positive integer values. Means that it will be the constant value, which is larger than 0. Okay, now we look at the example of the syntax in C++ and also Java for the two-dimensional array. Here we have a two-dimensional array of size 3 multiplied by 2 elements. So we have 3 rows and 2 columns. Here we declare the size of rows and columns with constant value. Then it will be the integer type of the value. We have the variable name of rows and also columns. So for rows, we declare and initialize it to 3, and for column, we assign the value of 2. We just follow the instruction here. After that, we can declare the array. Here we have the integer data type for the array exams, and then we put the size of the rows and also the size of the columns. So this is the syntax of C++, and we also have the syntax of Java. Here we have the table here. For the same, the index number for the row and column will be start from 0. So look at the column here. For the first column, we have the index number of 0. For the second column, we have the index number of 1. For the row, we start with index number of 0. The first row, we have index number of 0. For the second row, we have index number of 1. And then the third row, we have the index number of 2. So this is the index number. If we want to access the value inside each of the element of the array, we can just refer to the index number. For the first value, we have the index number of 0, 0. Means that we have to put the index number for row first, then the second square bracket, we put the index number of column. For the second row item number 1, we have the index number of 1 for the row, and the column we have 0. And for the third item, we have the index number of row 2, and then the column 0. Same for the column 1. For the row 0, we just put 0. For the column 1, we just put 1. For the row 1, with the index number of 1, we just put 1. For the column with the index number of 1, we just put 1. So the last one will be index row of 2, and then we have the column index number of 1. So this is when you want to access the value inside the array. Now we look at two-dimensional array initialization. After we declare the two-dimensional array, we can assign the value to it. So this is called initialization. Here we have two-dimensional array of size 3 multiplied by 2 elements. Here we have the constant value for the size of rows and also column. So for rows, we have 3 rows and column we have 2. Here we have the declaration of the two-dimensional array. We have the data type of integer with the array name of exams. Then we have the size of rows and also the size of column. Here we initialize the value to it. So this is two-dimensional array. So we can use inner curly braces to separate each of the set of the value. So for the first set of the value, we have 84 and also 78. So this is the first row with 2 columns. And then the second value, we separate it with comma. And then we have 92 and 97. So this is the second row. And then we have the column of 2. And we have the third row value. So when installed inside the array, you can draw a table here. So this is the index number of 0 for the column and 1 for the column. For row, we have 0, 1, 2. So you just store accordingly. For the first value, you store in the location of index 0, 0. So we have the value of 84. For the second column, first row, we have 78 with the index number of 0 for the row and index number of 1 for the column. So we just store the value accordingly. If we want to access each of the value, then we can just refer to the index number. If we have the array name of exams with the row index number of 1 and also the column index number of 1, so it will be referring to the value of 97, because when we have row equal to 1, column is equal to 1 also, then we have the value of 97. We have the row position for the first square bracket and then the column position for the second square bracket. So this is how you access the element inside the two-dimensional array. Now we look at how are we going to process two-dimensional arrays. For two-dimensional array, it can be processed in 3 different ways. The first way is to process the entire array. The second way is just to process a particular row of the array. And the third way is just to process a particular column of the array. So it depends on which way that you want to access the array item. So you can access the entire array. You can just refer to the particular row, or you just refer to the particular column. Each row or column of a two-dimensional array is one-dimensional array. So we have row and column. So each of the row and column, we can treat it as one-dimensional array. So when we process a particular row or column of two-dimensional array, we can use the algorithms similar to process one-dimensional array. Now we look at the first example of how are we going to process two-dimensional arrays. Now we want to sum up all of the elements in two-dimensional array. Here we have the declaration of the constant value for the size of rows with 5 and also columns with 5 also. Here we have the declaration of the variable of total with integer data type. We initialize it to 0. Now here we have the declaration and also initialization of two-dimensional array. We have integer data type, array name of numbers. Here we have the size of the row and also the size of the column. So it will refer back to the previous statement. We have the size of row is 5 and the size of column is 5. Then we just initialize the value to it. We just follow the row and column. So we separate each of the set of the value with comma. For the first row, we have 27964. So we can store 5 values because we have 5 columns. So you can refer to this table. For the first row with the index number of 0, we have 5 columns with the index number starting with 0 until 4. So we just store accordingly, 27964. And for the second row, we have 61894. The third row, we have 43729. And the row number 4, we have 99031. And the last row, we have 62741. So we just store accordingly. So if we want to access the value in it, we just follow the index number. Okay, now we are using the for loop to sum up all of the elements in two-dimensional array. If we want to access two-dimensional array, we can use nested for loop. So for the outer for loop is representing the index number of the row. So for the row, we have the index number start with 0 and we loop until less than the size of the row. And here we have the increment operator to increase the index number of the row. This is the outer for loop. For the inner for loop, we can access the index number of the column. So for the column, we start with index 0 and we loop until less than the size of the column. Here we have the update statement to increase the number of column, the index number of the column for each of the loop. Then here we have the expression for the total. This is the short form for total is equal to total plus the number. Number is the array name, so it will just plus the value according to the index number. After we done looping and we total up the value, we will display the value the total is. So this is the final value after we sum up all of the value that we store inside the array. Now we look at the for loop here. For the outer for loop, when row is equal to 0, 0 is less than 5. Just now we declare the number of row is equal to 5. So we will loop until row is equal to 4. Index number from 0 until 4. So when this condition is true, because 0 is less than 5, then we will go to the statement inside the for loop here. So we have another inner for loop. So this is the column. For the column, we start with 0. 0 is less than 5. So this condition is true. When this condition is true, then we try to execute this expression. So total is equal to total. So for the total, we have to initialize it to 0. Then we just plus the first item because row is equal to 0 and the column is equal to 0. So when we have row 0, column 0 means that we have the first value of 2. So you have the first value of 2. So you can refer to the table in the right-hand side. The first value we have 2. After that, it will just look again for the inner one, column plus 1. So 0 plus 1, we have the index number of 1. Again, we try to execute this statement. For row still remain 0. So for column number 1, we have the value of 7. So it will just accumulate the value. 2 plus 7, we get 9. So here we get 9. And then it will just loop again for the column. So now our index number will be 1 plus 1. Then we have the index number of 2. So the value will be 9. So just now we get the value of 9. 9 plus 9, we get 18. And then we just continue with the next loop. We have column index number of 3 with the value of 6. So just now we have 18. Now we have 18 plus 6, we get 24. And then same for the last one, 24 plus 4, we get 28. So after that, we already look until column is equal to 4. When column is equal to 5, the condition no longer true. So we will just exit the inner for loop and we go to the outer for loop. For the outer for loop, now it will increase the row by 1. So the index number of row now is equal to 1. So when row is equal to 1, here we have the row of 1. Again, we access all of the column here. We just continue. So just now we add up, the first column is 28. Now we have to add out the second row with the first column of 6. So 28 plus 6, we get 34. 34 plus 1, we get 35, and so on. So we will just continue to loop until the end of the data that we have. So the final sum of the value will be 1, 2, 3. So it will just see out means display the message. The total is 1, 2, 3. So this syntax is in C++. Now we look at the second example. Here we have the number of students, 3. This is the constant value. And then we have the number of score is 5. And then we have the variable of total with the data of double and also average of double. So this one, the purpose of this program is to sum up the rows or column in a two-dimensional array. Here we have two-dimensional array with the data type of double and we have the array name of score. Here we have two square bracket. The first square bracket refers to the size of the student. And the second bracket, we refer to the size of the score. So we only have 3 students. Each of the students will have 5 score. This is how we store inside the index number. So we just store accordingly. The first row, we have 88, 97, 79, 86, 94, and so on. For the second row, we have 86, 91, 78, 79, and 84. And for the last row, we have 82, 73, 77, 82, and 89. So here is representing the index number of the row and also column. Okay, here we have the code. Continue with the previous slide. Now we would like to get the average score for each of the students. Means that we want to sum the row in two-dimensional array. So this is the first row. So we have to sum out the first row of the score, which is the student number 1. And if for student number 2, we have the second row. So we want to calculate the average score of one student. So let's say we have 5 subjects. So we would like to get the average score for one student. Again, we can use nested for loop. Okay, for the outer for loop is referring to the row, which is the number of students. We only have 3 rows because we only have 3 students. So the index number start with 0 means that we have the first row. And the number of students is less than 3. If we have 3 students, means that the index number always start with 0 until 2 only. And then we have the total value of 0. Now we would like to have the inner for loop to sum out the value for each of the individual row. Okay, when row is equal to 0, so 0 is less than 3, so we just proceed to the statement inside the for loop. Here we have the index number for the column. So for the index number of the column, we start with 0. We will look until the column is less than the index number of 5. Because we have 5 scores means that the index number will be from 0 until 4 only. So again, we have the expression to total up the value for each of the column for a particular row. So when row is equal to 0, so this is the row, then we have to access all of the column in the first row. So for the column 1, we have the value of 88. For the column 1 means that we have the index number of 0. So we have the first value of 88. After that, we just look again, we increase the index number of column. When column is equal to index number of 1 is less than 5. So we will refer to the second column here. So we get 97. So this expression is to total up the value. So we just accumulate. The first value of the total, we have 88. Just now we already update it. So now we have 88 plus 97. So we will get the value of 185. Then we just look again, we access the column with the index number 2. So here we have 185 plus 79, we get 264. And then we just look again, 264 plus 86, we get 350. And the last one, we have 350 plus 94. And then the total score for the first student will be 444. So this is just for the first student. After that, we would display the message, score average for the student row +1. So this is just to display the row 1. This is just to display the value of 1. Score average for student 1 is 1. So for the average, we have to get the total. Just now we have the total of 444 divided by the number of score. We have 5 subjects. So it will get 444 divided by 5. Then it will just display the average for the first student. So after that, we just proceed to the next loop. So we increase the row value. We increase the row value. So now row value is equal to 1. So 1 is less than 3. So again, you have to access the second row of the score. So for the total value, just now we accumulate to 444. But now we will initialize it to 0. So the total start with 0. So again, we have to sum up each of the value in the column. So we start with 86. So for the first value, we have total 0 plus 86. Then we get 86. And we look again, increase the column value to 1. So 86 plus 91, we get 177. And then we will look again, and we get the value 177 plus 78. We get 255, and we look again, we get 334 plus 79, and so on. So we will get the final total value for the second student. Here we have 418, then we have to divide by 5 in order to get the average score for this student. Then after display the message, we look again for the third student. So here we have the third row of the information of the student. Again, you just sum it out. And then when we get the third student, total score is 403. We just divide by 5 to display the average of the student 3. Okay, here we have example 3. Just now we get the average score for each of the student. So now maybe we want to get the average score for each of the subject. Let's say the first column representing the subject of science. So we just average up the score for the science. The second, if we have sejarah, history, then we just get the average of the mark for the history and so on. So just now we are accessing the row. Now we want to sum out the column and get the average. So again, we use the for loop and also the inner for loop. This is called nested for loop. So for this situation, we can put the column index number as the outer for loop. And then for the inner one, we use the row as the index number. So when column is equal to when column is equal to 0, 0 is less than 5 because we have the score of 5. Then we just proceed to the statement inside the for loop. Here we have the initialization of the value of total is equal to 0. Then we have to sum up each of the individual column. So when row is equal to 0, 0 is less than 3. So this condition is true. So we have the expression total is equal to total plus the score of row. Row, here we have 0. Then we have column 0. So we have 88. So we just store the first value of total 88 to the table here. Then we look again. Now row is equal to 1 because we increased by 1. 0 plus 1, we get 1. When index is equal to 1, the column still remains 0. So we have the value of 86. 88 plus 86, we get 174. And then we have to look again after we increase the row value of index number. Now we have 1 plus 1 equal to 2. So when we have the index number of 2, the column still remains 0. So we just accumulate the value. 174 plus 82, we get 256. So after that, if we have done, we just get the average of the score. Then we have 256 divided by number of students. Number of students, we only have 3. So here we have 256 divided by 3. So we will get the average value and we try to display it. Class average for text for the column plus 1 means that we have the first column is equal to what average. So we just calculate 256 divided by 3, we get the answer and we just display it. So this is just for the first subject. Let's say we have the subject of science. So this is just the average for the subject of science. Then after that, we just look again, we increase the value of the column. So now column is equal to 0 plus 1. So we access the second column. Again, we initialize the total value to 0 because we don't want to accumulate from the previous score. We want to start with the new subject. So now row is equal to 0. This is the first row and the column is with the index of 1 now. So here we have the value of 97. So 0 plus 97, we get 97. Then it will look again, increase the row value. Row is not equal to 1. The column still remain 1. So we have 91. 97 plus 91, we get 188. Then we just look again. So when index number is equal to 2 for the row, we get the value of 73. So here we have 188 plus 73, we get 261. After that, we just average out. So here we have the second score of the subject. Let's say we have history, then we have 261. So 261 divided by 3, what is the value for the average? You will just store inside the average. Then you can just display class average for test. So now we have the value of 2. The column number 2 is what average value. So you can just put inside the compiler. It will just calculate the average for you. So other than one-dimensional array and two-dimensional array, we also can have array with 3 or more dimensions. So here we have the example in C++ syntax and also Java syntax. So this array with 3 or more dimensions, you can explore it yourself. So this array with 2 or more dimensions is still possible. So that's all for the first session. Thank you very much.